Hello there, and welcome back to another Interp series video. Today we'll be talking about blocking. This is part 2 of a 4-part series on blocking. And today we'll be talking about event-specific blocking, as well as some adjustments that you can make to help you better perform in a room. My name's Xavier. I'm one of the Interp coaches at Bellarmine College Prep, and let's get started. So, in regards to event-specific blocking, please feel free to go ahead and skip to the event that you will be competing in for this upcoming season, and then skip towards the end of the video for stuff about adjustment and adjusting to the room in which you perform in. So there's no need to watch the events where you don't need to. The first event that we're going to be talking about, or first events that we're going to be talking about today, are DI, dramatic interpretation, and OPP, original prose and poetry, if it is more geared towards the dramatic end of the spectrum. In regards to morphs need to be super clean throughout the piece, especially in between time periods / scenes and in between characters. If this is more of a monologue piece, we need to make sure that your posture is super still, that you stand super tall without much sway. However, if this is more of a piece with multiple characters, your morphs need to be super clean and super clear, right? Create that space in between character A and character B. Make sure that you are deliberate and slow when you morph from A to B. Movements also need to be a lot more deliberate. Again, think slow and think clear. Stillness, especially in those DIs, especially when you get towards the climax, especially when you start building. We want and we prefer a DI in which you are not confusing the judges about what is going on in the piece. And again, this is similar and same with the characters, right? Like I mentioned in our previous videos on blocking and morphing, as well as popping, you want to make sure that judges aren't confused about which characters that you're in throughout your speech. Make sure, as I mentioned in our previous lecture, part 1B on blocking, that if you have any objects in your hand, that they are consistent, clean, and clear. Make sure that you don't pick up an object in your hand and then forget to put it down, or suddenly swap objects in the middle of your speech in your hand without having picked up another object, right? If you're going to pick up an object and then put it down later, make sure you let go of it. All that consistency needs to be there in a DI and a dramatic OPP. Posture. This sort of ties into what I was talking about being still, as well as like standing tall. You should not be slouching as any of your characters. The reason for that is that creates a lot of putting your body in that slouch position creates too much potential for your head to sort of tilt down towards the floor. And once you do that, the judge can't judge you based on your facial expressions, which is a big no-no. Transitions. Do we transition through a morph, right? Do we go from scene 1 to scene 2 by morphing into perhaps from character A's childhood as like a 6-year-old kid to now a teenager going to high school, right? Or do we transition through a sound effect? Do we like whistle and then transition? Or perhaps do we transition by moving from one end of a stage to another? Or do we transition through 180-degree turns where we start facing the audience and then transition with our back towards the audience, right? What is the transition? Either way, we need to make sure that that transition is clean and that transition is clear, that judges know that when you transition from A to B, that we're representing perhaps like 2 parts of your character's life or something like that. Lastly, please remember that intensity does not mean that you can yell, right? When you're building up to the climax, or you're building through your rising action or your inciting incident, you can get more intense. And remember that intensity is a feeling that you can start building in your gut and then transitioning towards your chest and then emoting through your facial expressions and your eyes and eyebrows. That doesn't mean that you can just start yelling and screaming your lungs off, right? Yelling does not mean that something is intense. The next two events that we're going to be talking about is HI, or humorous interpretation, and OPP, original prose and poetry, if you're writing it more from a humorous side of things. Couple things about pops here. Just like morphs for DI, the pops in your HI and OPP need to be very clean and very clear. If this is a monologue, same thing with the DI, make sure that you're standing still, standing tall. However, if this is a piece with more than one character, your pops need to be super clean and super clear. Again, with HI, if you have a bunch of characters, like 3 or more, 4 or more, judges will have a very hard time trying to keep track of all of them. The easiest thing that you can do for yourself and do for the judge is make sure that those characters are super clear, that each character has a separate posture, a separate accent, a separate sort of body position, different sorts of facial expressions, so that we can distinguish character A from character B. You also want to make sure that when we transition in between characters, that you sort of like move halfway in between the original characters and the next character, so that when you pop, you can be quick and clear without lots of space in between. So for example, if character A is handing something off to character B, perhaps you can stick your hand out towards the audience as character A, and then pop into character B, and then your hand's already there, right? Your arm's already stuck out. So you can just, character B can open their palm or his palm and grab whatever they need from character A. We want to make sure that pops are quick and clear without lots of space in between. Another thing that we can do is make sure that we have facial expressions that change in between our characters. That's another easy way to distinguish and to differentiate between characters. And again, movements need to be quick and clean. Think fast and clear. More physicality. Remember, not necessarily more movement, right? More movement can actually be detrimental because that confuses judges who don't really know what is going on in the actual piece. Think more dynamic or dynamism, right? You want to be dynamic. You want your characters to have depth, and you want them, like, let's say you are in a scene in which 2 characters are fighting over some petty little thing, right? Use your facial expressions to sort of show me how ridiculous this is, right? Judges prefer that rather than perhaps like really fast movements where you're changing it in between characters too quickly to the point where it just gets really confusing. And again, just like DI, if you need a little refresher about objects, refer back to part 1B, that lecture on blocking. If you have any objects in your hand, again, they need to be consistent, clean, and clear. Don't drop or swap objects in the middle of your speech without having picked up another object. Make sure that if you're going to drink from a glass, so you put it down and let go of it before grabbing something else with your hands, etc., etc. Posture. Don't slouch. Again, don't want to tilt your head down so that you can't see, or the judges can't see your face. It's super important that the judges can see your face. Lastly, transitions. Same thing here. Do we transition through a morph? Do we use a sound effect, right? Do we have physical movement from one place to another? With HIs and OPPs, humorous OPPs, I see a lot of sound effect sort of movements, and as well as like 180-degree turns where we go from a sort of whistle, and then the performer turns their body around to make sure their back is faced towards the audience, and then the whistle again or some sort of noise, and then they turn back into the new, completely new scene. So that's it for HI and a humorous OPP. For duo, pops, and the accents need to be completely clean throughout the piece. You want to make sure that your characters are super consistent between the two partners. Whatever we've been talking about for DI and HI, those carry over, okay? Cleanliness of pops, cleanliness of morphs, all of that is super important and crucial for duo. Movements, they need to be quick and clean. Again, think fast and clear. In terms of humorous duo pieces, again, we want more dynamism. We want more physicality. Again, not necessarily movement. We don't want to confuse judges. But for example, if you have a fight scene, their body is going to be twisting and turning. There are going to be jumps. Think tight, right? We want you and your partner to be tightly wound up together such that it looks like you are actually fighting. That's super important. Another super important thing about duo is that you have blind blocking, where sort of one person or one partner can't see the other, but you all still manage to be in sync. That's super cool, and judges really pick up on that. For dramatic pieces, on the other hand, cleanliness is valued. So morphs, transitions, right? Keeping that simple but clean. That's super important for dramatic pieces. And for both dramatic and humorous duo pieces, you need to be keeping it real. Those characters, they need to be reacting to each other, as well as making sure that their accents, their characterization is super clean. Synchronization. You need to make sure that your partner is synchronized with you. It's super important that you both act and match as if you were like literally one person with each physical movement. That includes transitions, right? So if one partner is slightly off, it just makes everything super duper unclear and unclean. Another super duper important thing, you need to make sure that you're reacting to each other. So for example, if character A says something, character B needs to show me on their face how they react to character A. So your partner should interact with you as if you are speaking and acting directly with each other. That's super duper important. Transitions. These possibilities are pretty much endless. You can have back-to-back transition, side-to-side transition, diamond transitions where one person is behind the other and they jump in front and you swap back and forth. One partner can have their back turned towards the audience, the other is facing the audience, etc., right? There are so many different blocking ideas for duo and so many transition ideas for duo that you need to make sure that when you come and you block this thing, that it's complex, it's dynamic, it's good to watch, it's super clean and super clear, and that your transitions are super duper strong. For POI, or programmed oral interpretation, similar to more HI here, your pops and accents need to be super clean throughout the piece. Pops should occur after a page flip or a page turn. Remember that you have your binder and your manuscript in your binder. Those transitions need to be completely clear. Once you flip that page, you should be in your other character. Keep your characters consistent between flips and pieces. Again, don't blend them into each other. When you flip the page, it should be a clear change from not only piece to piece, but also from character A to character B. I also want you to make sure that you're adjusting to the tempo, pacing, and the beat of your poems. Remember that programmed oral interpretation requires you to have some sort of drama, prose, and or poetry, right? So if you get to that poetry stage, make sure that you're adjusting to the tempo, adjusting to the pacing, and adjusting to the beat of those poems. Don't rush. Don't sort of speak as if the poem were just prose or drama. Make sure that you're actually taking the time to adjust to that tempo and that pacing. Second thing, binder check. Because you can use your black binder as a prop, be creative with it, right? Use your binder as like a tip of a gun, right? Or perhaps like a shield, or as a bird that sort of flutters and flies away, as a laptop, right? use your binders in ways that are more creative. Um, Judges like to see that, judges pick up on that, and judges may give you a little bonus if your binder check is more creative than other competitors. More metaphorical blocking. What do I mean by this? So, with more poems in your speech, you will have more metaphors that you can gesture at. So, for example, if there are lines that talk about you being chained, you can put your hands together as if you were in handcuffs. When you like break free from those chains, you could pull your hands apart, right, to demonstrate that you are being lifted from your chains, lifted from your burdens. So there's a lot more metaphorical blocking in POI. Similarly, you want to use tempo and pace to build towards the climax. You want to get faster and more intense with your characters and page flips as you get closer and closer towards the climax. Use your page flips to set the tone and the timing of a piece, right? The faster you are, the more intense you should probably be getting. The slower you are, the more deliberate your POI should be. So you want to use timing, you want to use intensity, facial expressions, tone, all of that good stuff to build your POI. Alrighty. Last thing before this lecture concludes is tips for blocking adjustments, being able to perform within the confines of the space that you are given. It's super important that you adjust to the room that you are actually performing in. I know that some rooms in Milpitas and some rooms at Leland High School or whatever school that league is being held at, sometimes they don't give you enough space. This is particularly problematic with a duo. However, it does mean that you need to adjust your movements and blocking to make sure that they're either tighter or smaller than you usually have practiced in the past. Sometimes, if you practice on carpet, transitioning to a hardwood or tiled floor may be different. Perhaps it's a little bit more slippery than you're used to. Perhaps you use taps, and because you've been practicing on more hardwood floors, when you get to a carpeted floor, it just sounds a little different. Either way, make sure that you're consistent with your blocking, right? Whatever you practice, bring that into the actual competition room. Next, make sure that you adjust your audience and their interaction, right? Especially for humorous pieces. Make sure that you pause to give the audience time to laugh or for their laughter to die down prior to moving on, right? If you find more of this latter case, for example, if you get to like finals at a big tournament in HI, or if you get to like state quals finals or nat quals finals, it is usually the case in which people will be sort of interacting and laughing a lot during your speech. If this is the case, please make sure that when you are paused and when people are laughing and reacting and laughing at your piece, that you sort of pause and sort of keep on reacting and keep on thinking as the character. You don't need to say anything. In fact, I encourage you not to, because any added words is perhaps a protestable offense. Just react non-verbally. So for example, if the audience is laughing and you just said this really absurd line, perhaps you can make your character think about what they just said and react maybe even disgustedly at it. So that's it for this video. Please, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask your coach, ask your peers, ask your captains. They're all great resources for you to turn to. And please join us for our last lecture on blocking part 3. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.